Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Pam. Today I'm going to be making some chocolate chip cookies. Pretty standard fare, but I do want to point out a few things. I'm not going to assume everybody's level of cooking. There might be some folks watching that maybe have never made chocolate chip cookies. Basically what you want to do when you do the cookies is you want to do your sugars together, okay? Along with your softened butter. And by soft, I mean really, really, really soft. You need to leave the butter out for about half an hour to an hour. Depends on, the temperature of your house. But basically, you want that butter completely soft without hard chunks in it. And you don't want it melted. So just be patient and let it get soft, to room temperature over a bit of time instead of microwaving it. If you microwave it or something, it's going to melt. And then you're not going to get the texture in your cookie that you want. So yeah, you do the sugar and the butter, and then you do the 2 eggs and the vanilla. And then once you have all that together, you start slowly adding in your dry mixture. And it is a mixture because you've got flour, and then you have salt, baking powder, and baking soda. And what I like to do is take my dry ingredients, put them in the flour, put them through a sifter, and into a secondary bowl. And I do that because these are your leavening agents. This is what's going to make your cookies have some lift to them instead of being flat like a frickin' pancake. Now, I also want to point out, this is light brown sugar. The difference between light brown sugar and dark brown sugar has more molasses in it. It'll taste more of a heavy caramely flavor, but it also has a bit more moisture. The last batch of cookies I made like this, all I had on hand was a dark brown sugar. I made them with that, and they were flat as a pancake. So I'm going to do the recipe again, and hopefully they'll turn out better this time since I am back to my original recipe that I normally make, which I'm going to share with you guys. Be back in a moment. Okay, so I've got my mixer here. I've got my 1 cup of light brown sugar, 1 cup of regular granulated sugar, and then 1 cup, which is 2 sticks of butter. I do like to use the KerryGold brand. I find that particular butter very delicious, much better than any American brand butter I have bought in, even like hand churn farmers market Amish type butter. KerryGold still superior. It has to do with the milk that they use from their cows. So let it go a little bit. So you want to blend it basically till it's completely, the butter and the sugar is completely creamed together. And then you go ahead and you put the eggs in, and then mix them in until it's mixed all the way. And then you add the vanilla and mix that in until it's mixed all the way. I'll be back. Okay, now comes the vanilla. I'll put the entire recipe either in the notes or in the description, the video description, with the proper amounts of each ingredient to use. Okay, now we've got our brown sugar, butter, and vanilla extract in here, and that's all we have. And you see the consistency of it? It's completely, I wouldn't say thin necessarily, but it's completely homogeneous, blended. That is not, see, I've got some lighting issues in here. And you can see that there's no chunks of butter in there or big chunks of brown sugar or something. It's completely homogeneous and, a semi-smooth butter mixture. And that's what you want. And that is really going to help make your cookies turn out the way you want them to. And that's why you have to have that butter completely softened but not melted before you start making your cookies. It really makes a huge difference. And the next thing that makes a huge difference is making sure your leavening agents are very much well mixed and incorporated into your flour. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Okay, so I've got one of these old-timey sifter things, right? So basically what I'm going to do is take all my dry ingredients, put them in the flour, kind of give it a light stir, and then put it through here and sift it through. That way I know for sure it's completely well mixed. That's why I need the secondary bowl. Okay, so I believe that is the baking powder. It's either baking powder or baking soda. Baking powder, there's use less of that. And, or maybe that's baking powder. I don't know. One's baking powder, one's baking soda. There is a difference between the two, and it is important that you pay attention when you're putting your recipe together. Okay, and then this is the salt. Throw the salt in there. And like I said, what I want to do is make sure that this is mixed up together well. I can just mix it with a spoon or something, and it'll do a fine job, you know, an okay job, but it's still not going to be incorporated completely evenly. It's just not. And that's why I throw it through the sifter, to make sure that it really is incorporated evenly. That way my cookies rise evenly. Okay. So like I said, I'm just going to kind of fold in the baking powder, baking soda, and salt. But, I mean, you can imagine that is not well mixed. Even if I just kept mixing by hand, it's still not going to be as incorporated as if when I put it through here. It's just not. So that's what I'm going to do. It basically just comes through a sifter. See? Besides, it's kind of fun. These cake sifters, flour sifters, are also used a lot of times when you make homemade cakes. I use it for that, but I always also use it for my cookies. Okay, you can probably hear my dog sneezing in the background. He just came in from outside. He has allergies. Okay, so I'm going to take some of this flour and put it in the bowl and then mix it. You just want to do a little bit at a time, not too much. That way the dough gets properly mixed. Okay, so I just did a little bit of flour, mixed it up, and then just keep doing it a little bit at a time until you've got all the flour in there and it's all the way mixed up. Okay, so basically when you get it all mixed, you want like a modeling clay type consistency. So I can roll that into a ball and it keeps its shape. Sorry, I hit the camera arm. So you want it thick like that, okay? And you want to make sure that it's all the way mixed, that you don't have like pockets of flour in there and stuff, okay? Time for the 2 cups of chocolate chips. I like using the Ghirardelli semi-sweet, but here's where you can really get creative, of course. You can use different brands of chocolate chips. You can use half milk chocolate, half semi-sweet. You can do basically any combination you want. You know, half white chips and half dark chips. Cut back on the chips and put in whatever, you know, walnuts or pecans, whatever you prefer in there. And make it your own. Okay, so we've got all the chocolate chips mixed up in the mixture. I like to use a scoop, and that way the cookies are all even. I do kind of overfill the scoop just a little bit. Make a big old fat cookie. The size of that sucker. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Cookie. I like cookies, y'all. All right, here's the next one. So I just keep going and going. Now, typically, these don't spread real far. We shall see. Like I said, last time I made these cookies, They didn't turn out so great, but this is a tried and true recipe. I've been using this recipe for years now, and that was the first time they spread out all over the place. One, I didn't use KerryGold butter, and then the second major change was the brown sugar. Like I said, all I had on hand was dark brown sugar, so I used it. Now, I will say, if you've ever had Tate's cookie, Tates, Tates, Tate's cookies, they're a store-bought cookie. Pretty common brand. They're real thin, and I think they're all natural. They're really, really good. I'm pretty sure they don't have preservatives in them and that type of thing. They're really delicious. So these cookies, when I made them with the brown sugar and they did not rise, they stayed real flat. They tasted a lot like Tate's. They were really good. They just weren't fluffy the way I like them. So I'm going to cook these at 375. I start them off. The recipe calls for 8 to 12 minutes. You know, depending on your altitude, you're going to have to adjust that. I am maybe 3 feet above sea level, so if that. So I am going to cook these for about 9 minutes at 375 and see where I am. Usually about 9 minutes. I go ahead and rotate the pan. Sometimes they're done at that time, but the recipe calls for 375, I think 8 to 12 minutes. My theory is I can always cook them a little bit longer, but once they're burnt, I can't take that away. So I like to cook them for less time and then add time if I need to. All right, so that's what I'm going to do, and I will be back and show you the finished cookie. Okay, so that tray of cookies that you saw me put together, that's all I'm baking for now. I'm not baking the rest. So what do I do with the rest? I put them in the freezer or the refrigerator. These I'm probably just going to refrigerate. And then you can just take out a couple cookies at a time and bake them when you feel like you want to have a nice, warm, fresh cookie. I do not recommend eating the dough. They are made with raw eggs. I know growing up, did that all the time. Just not doing that. Although these eggs in particular are probably safer than most store-bought eggs in the U.S. because these eggs are from my husband's chickens. He has chickens that he takes care of now. And we have eggs coming out of our ears. So, anyway, we got a bunch of farm eggs. And that is what these cookies are made with. So I'm just going to go ahead and load this tray up here with cookies. And I usually can get 3 layers in this particular dish. And then what I do is just separate each layer with a piece of parchment paper, and they don't stick. And they'll freeze for a couple months, and they'll last a couple weeks in the refrigerator. So just a tip. All right, there they are. Nice, thick, fat chocolate chip cookies. Like I said, you'll know that the dough consistency is right when it feels like modeling clay or Play-Doh. Typically my cookies do spread out a little bit more than these did. I think it's because of the eggs that I used. My husband's chickens aren't fully mature yet, and the eggs are a little on the small side, and this recipe calls for 2 large eggs, and I would say the eggs were more on the small side, so I think it's just a little bit of lack of moisture. They didn't spread quite as much. But I'm sure they're going to be delicious, and I'll show you when they cool down. Naya, what you sniffing at, Naya? Oh, a cookie? Look at that cookie, Naya. Look at the cookie. Oh, it's Naya approved. Naya approved? Naya, what do you think of the cookie? All right, thanks for watching. Appreciate you. Oop, she's going to take a bite. Bye.